On December 2nd, 2009, Florida Polk County Sheriff's Department made an announcement.
We have no idea where Abraham Shakespeare is.
8 months had passed since the $30 million jackpot winner had suspiciously disappeared without a trace, and now the case was dangerously close to going cold. But the internet was not going to let this happen. Immediately, a thread was started on the Websleuths forum. User Kaylin Couture posts, a $5,000 reward is being offered in the search for a missing Florida lottery winner from Polk County. Abraham Shakespeare won $31 million in 2006. The 43-year-old was last seen in the Lakeland area in early April. Spokeswoman Donna Wood had previously said that perhaps Shakespeare does not want to be found, but authorities still need to ask for the public's help in locating him. This would be the first of thousands of posts on the forum that would dig up evidence crucial to solving the mystery and finding out that the truth behind Shakespeare's disappearance was far more disturbing than anyone realized. Wednesday, November 15th, 2006. 41-year-old Abraham Shakespeare and his co-worker Michael Ford are driving across Florida to make deliveries. Shakespeare is an everyday working man. He grew up illiterate and dropped out of school in the 8th grade to help his father, an orange picker. He has a criminal record for petty crime, ranging from small-time theft to unpaid child support. Regardless of his past, he served his time, and when he got out of prison, he worked hard. He kept his head above the water by taking several odd jobs, mostly good old-fashioned labor. Shakespeare and Ford pass by the city of Frostproof, and they decide to take a little break. They stop by a convenience store, and Ford asks Shakespeare if he wants anything. Shakespeare opens his wallet and looks at his last $5. He hands Ford $2 and asks for 2 lottery tickets. This would end up being the best and worst decision of his life. Later on, Shakespeare checks the lottery results. 6, the first number matches. Then he looks at the second. 12, another match. 1 by 1, 13, 34, 42, 52, all a match. He just won the lottery. In disbelief, Shakespeare finds himself with the winning numbers of a $30 million jackpot, a staggering amount of money that he isn't even able to comprehend. He swings by to collect his prize on Friday and poses for a photo op while holding a comically large check. Shakespeare chooses a $17 million lump sum payout, rather than taking $1.5 million over 20 years. After taxes, he takes home about $11 million. Still, this was no small number, certainly more than the vast majority of people will ever see in their lifetime. But in the midst of this sudden windfall would come a devastating falling out. He is suddenly hit by a lawsuit from someone whom he considered to be one of his closest friends, Ford. You see, Ford felt that he was entitled to a cut of Shakespeare's winnings. After all, he was the one who bought the ticket for him, and he was the one who drove them to that convenience store in Frostproof. Ford shows up at Shakespeare's house and demands $1 million, but Shakespeare refuses. Ford, furious, sues Shakespeare, accusing him of stealing the lottery tickets from his truck. What seemed like a simple spat between friends would end up making local and national headlines. Ford is represented by his lawyers Arnold Levine and Michael LaRudo, while Willie Gary was in Shakespeare's corner. The case was Ford's word against Shakespeare's, but it only takes the jury a little over an hour to throw out Ford's case. Ford wasn't going to give up though, and he would continue to file appeals that would drag out the case for the next 3 years. But at least for now, the money is now firmly in Shakespeare's hands. Well, other than the $8,600 he is forced to pay in outstanding child support for his 5-year-old son. People who suddenly gain access to millions of dollars have been known to splurge a lot of their winnings on ridiculously expensive luxury items. Private jets, constant vacations, luxury cars, war elephants, you name it. Of course, Shakespeare buys himself some nice things, a Nissan Altima, some new clothes, a Rolex watch from a pawn shop, and a $1 million home along Red Hawk Bend with the help of a realtor, Barbara Jackson, all of which hardly put a dent into his fortune. But that's pretty much all he buys with his money. He continues to spend frugally, pick up spare change off the ground, and hang out with his friends at a local supermarket. But Shakespeare doesn't keep this wealth to himself and generously shares the money with those around him. He buys his girlfriend a pickup truck and sets up a $1 million trust fund for his son. He gives or loans out money for debts, rents, funerals, and mortgages, sometimes for people he doesn't even know. Imagine giving complete strangers hundreds, if not thousands of dollars out of the goodness of your heart. His family also benefits from his good fortune, as he gives 3 of his stepsisters $250,000 each, his mother Elizabeth Walker $12,000, and his sister $10,000. But having so much money quickly takes its toll on Shakespeare. Months pass, and he is still repeatedly badgered by friends, family, and complete strangers for a cut of his earnings. His phone buzzes incessantly with requests for money. Sometimes he receives letters. Since Shakespeare can't read, he asks Santoria Butler, his girlfriend, to read the letters for him. One such letter comes from a local inmate who asks him for $1,000. The couple laugh. What would a prisoner possibly do with that much money behind bars? Still, they send him $50 anyway. After 3 years of being taken advantage of at nearly every turn, Shakespeare is exhausted, miserable even. One of his closest friends, Greg Smith, who runs a barbershop, noticed how haggard Shakespeare has become. "I wish I could go back to my old self," Shakespeare complains to him. And then, in April 2009, Shakespeare stops coming by the barbershop. No one's seen him driving around town. Not one of his friends or family is able to get a hold of him. Many begin to suspect that he has simply run away. Seemed likely, given all the people constantly after him for his money. But something is strange about all this. Shakespeare has his troubles, yes, but his friends know him well, and he isn't the type to just get up and disappear on his own. November 2009, 7 months after Shakespeare disappears, his cousin Cedric Edom reports him missing. Immediately, detectives pull up Shakespeare's phone records and discover that his phone was last used on April 6, 2009, near Plant City, Florida. There's just a small problem. This is the only clue authorities have. But then Shakespeare's best friend, Eddie Dixon, directs them to a new person of interest, a woman by the name of D.D. Moore. She was apparently helping Shakespeare collect the money he had loaned out. D.D. herself claims that she helped Shakespeare flee the country to get away from all the leeches constantly after his money. She even shares a video with the police that shows Shakespeare expressing his desire to get away.
Do you get tired of people asking you for money all the time, Abe? Give me your opinion on it.
I've been tired. A year ago.
You're just ready to start living your life, huh?
They don't take no for an ounce or so. I just let them keep on acting.
So where do you want to go to?
It don't matter to me. I'm not a picky person.
Are you going to miss your home?
Yep, I miss it, but life goes on.
This makes sense to Cedric, who knows his cousin had talked about wanting to leave. This also makes sense to Shakespeare's mother, Elizabeth Walker, who recalls her son wanting to go to Jamaica or some other country in the Caribbean. But if that is where he ended up, relaxing on a beach sipping on margaritas, his mother just wants to know that he's safe. But Dee isn't exactly the most trustworthy individual. The police know that she was, or still is, a con artist. For example, in 2001, she attempted an insurance fraud scheme by faking a carjacking, all so she could avoid paying outstanding payments on the vehicle. But even though she has a messy track record, she appears to have good intentions in assisting Shakespeare. She is, at the very least, a moderately successful businesswoman. But what business did this woman have with Shakespeare in the first place? Well, let's go back to when Shakespeare first won the lottery. His name was all over the news. A blue-collar worker down on his luck was suddenly a multi-millionaire. It was hard not to root for him. Everyone loves an underdog, including D.D. Moore. Drawn to the drama of his life, she approached Shakespeare shortly after he had purchased his first home. She wanted to write a book about him and chronicle his incredible story, but her role quickly turned from author to financial advisor, as she set up a company for him, Abraham Shakespeare LLC, to handle his fortune and assets. As she assisted Shakespeare in reorganizing his finances, she used $1 million, which she says was a gift from Shakespeare, to buy herself a Hummer, a Corvette, and a truck. Later, after Shakespeare's disappearance, Dee claimed to still be in contact with him. She's still getting text messages from Shakespeare, assuring everyone that he's fine. And now she isn't the only one getting texts from Shakespeare. His family members have started getting them too. One text to a relative reads, "I'm a grown-ass man, and I'll come back when I want to." In another text to a friend, Shakespeare claims that he had gotten into trouble and that his bookie had, quote, bumped him on the head. Well, nothing out of the ordinary here. It all seems to line up with public knowledge that Shakespeare was tired of being hassled and used for his money. He seems to have run away and found peace, except for one small detail. People who know him well point out that Shakespeare was illiterate. How in the world was he sending those texts? The texts, though suspicious, are leading police nowhere. Months pass, and the trail is in danger of getting cold, fast. Pessimism begins to grow. In an interview, Polk County Sheriff Grady tells a reporter that we have no idea where Abraham Shakespeare is. Donna Wood, the Polk County Sheriff Office spokesperson, also speaks during a press briefing and states that perhaps Shakespeare simply does not want to be found. But this, as you can probably guess, is nowhere near the truth. And if it wasn't for a few average everyday people on the internet and their dedication to solving the mystery of what really happened to Abraham Shakespeare, this truth may have never come to light. If what you need isn't a team of internet sleuths, but a team of lawyers, then Morgan & Morgan, this video's sponsor, has you covered. If you're ever seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions. A Morgan & Morgan case in Florida ended in a settlement of $12 million, which is 34 times the highest insurance offer. And in Philadelphia, another case went home with 40 times the highest insurance offer at $26 million. And that was only within the last couple of months for victims involved in life-altering car crashes. They don't settle for lowball offers. Instead, if you become their client, they will fight to get you what you deserve. And you don't even have to pay them unless you win. So if you ever get seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you're only a few clicks away from potentially changing your life. It's so easy. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/brew, found in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen from your phone's camera. And thank you, Morgan & Morgan, for sponsoring today's video. On December 2nd, 2009, user Caitlin Couture posts about the Shakespeare case on the Websleuths.com online forum. She's a relatively well-known individual on the website which investigates a variety of crimes such as thefts, murders, and especially missing persons cases. She states the first crucial details relevant to the case: Shakespeare winning the lottery in November of 2006, that he was last seen 7 months ago in April 2009, and that his co-worker, Ford, had sued him for a portion of the winnings. Posters agree on Ford being the primary suspect since he had a strong motive to exact revenge on Shakespeare. It wasn't difficult to imagine. However, one poster, going by the handle Boy's Mum, shines the spotlight on Dee Dee. They discover her involvement in Shakespeare's life and how her company, American Medical Professionals, is in control of Shakespeare's finances and various estates. The situation with this Moore woman sounds rather strange. Two other users going by Sleuthster and Dreamweaver agree. Intuition tells them something fishy is going on with Dee Dee. They quickly track down her social media accounts, dating profile, home and business addresses, and information on her ex-husband James Moore. They also find a startling and possibly disturbing revelation. Many of Dee Dee's business addresses and title names were fraudulent or filled with duplicate names. Dee Dee also has several aliases, such as Donegan or Doris. User Want to Help posts a few of the several properties that show these duplicate names at work. In light of these shady financial and property records, user Meow333 posts, "Law enforcement needs to take a good look at this Dee Dee Moore woman. She's obviously into taking advantage of people. It's a shame Shakespeare couldn't have appointed someone to look out for him and help him manage his funds, as it's apparent way too many people took advantage of him." However, Sleuthster isn't eager to pin all the blame on Dee Dee. They still have their eyes on Ford, who has the clearer motive to do something to Shakespeare. It's also entirely possible, they point out, that Shakespeare could have just wandered off and become destitute after continuously giving away or lending out his money to whoever asked. User LA Law 2000 is more pessimistic about the outcome. In my opinion, Shakespeare is either being kept somewhere drugged out of his mind all the time or is sleeping with the fishes. But then, on December 5th, while the posters are busy trying to make sense of the information they are uncovering, they receive an unexpected guest. Under the handle D. Moore, Dee Dee herself posts a reply to the thread. "Hello, this is Dee Dee Moore. Since so many of you are interested in my life, I'm not a turtle that pulls my head in my shell. I also don't have anything to hide. This is what's wrong with our economy now. Instead of you working on a solution to help solve our nationwide problems, you're on a web page making comments about people you do not even know." She also adds in another post, "I suggest you remove all untrue facts posted. You should know your facts and make sure you're matching up the right person when you're slandering someone's character. It's against the law, and I worked too hard to get where I'm at today to stand up for my rights. You would want that same respect showed to you if I posted untrue statements about you." Dreamweaver responds, "The only reason Abraham Shakespeare is discussed on this board is because Polk County Sheriff's Office considers him a missing person. If he contacts the police, then he has satisfied law enforcement that he is okay. But what we do here is try to help find a missing person, and part of that is considering why he might be missing. The information posted on this thread is public information." Upon further digging, the sleuths discover that Dee Dee owed as much as $50,000 in debt to the IRS, which she conveniently only paid off in January of 2009 after meeting Shakespeare. In another instance, during court proceedings, she was granted access to Shakespeare's safety deposit box. In yet another, all of Shakespeare's assets had been transferred to Abraham Shakespeare LLC, a company which, given its title, one would assume is owned at least in part by Shakespeare himself. Upon closer inspection, nowhere in the actual company is Shakespeare listed, only D.D. Moore, the sole manager of everything that once belonged to Abraham Shakespeare. She was even currently living in his million-dollar home, the one purchased with the help of realtor Barbara Jackson, who, as it turns out, is the one who originally introduced Dee to Shakespeare. The list goes on, and as more information was uncovered by the Websleuths, suspicion against Dee grows. Many users, such as Dallas Dawn, are willing to engage with her and give her a chance to answer some hard-hitting questions. For instance, why did she and her medical company offer to buy out Shakespeare's estates? It couldn't have been solely out of the goodness of her heart. According to Dee, some of the people he loaned his money to made a fool of him. Out of all the loans, only 5% of the people were paying. He sold his bad debts to me, which gives me every right to collect. Abraham hoped that I would have better luck than the last 3 people he had collecting for him. He had a pending lawsuit for child support coming up with threats of others on the way. User Fairy1 also asks, if you purchased his assets at fair market value, I assume you have proof. I also assume you purchased his debt at a significant discount. Dee responds, business is business. I refused at first because I did not want all his headaches. He just kept making the deal even better. But then, LB Minnesota makes an interesting observation. As the transfer of Abraham's property assets involved quitclaim deeds, there is no money exchange. Someone takes ownership and claims a value. There's no proof that the owner even had knowledge of the transaction. Was this true? Had Dee acquired ownership of Shakespeare's loans and assets without him knowing? Well, she chooses not to comment on this possibility and instead decides to focus back on her allegations that Shakespeare was evading child support payment. I also knew he would have a warrant out for his arrest soon. He was in contempt of child support court. Fairy 1 proceeds to question the accuracy of this. So, we are to believe that he squandered away 11 of his $12 million but owed child support. Really? That really doesn't put him in the best possible light. They also point out that $9,000 of child support had been deducted from Shakespeare's winnings before he even collected it. On top of that, as we discussed before, shortly after winning the lottery, Shakespeare also set up a $1 million trust fund for his son. It seemed as though to the Websleuths that perhaps the only person slinging slander was Dee herself. Dee's reputation starts to look even worse when Want to Help shares the full details on her past supposed insurance fraud charge. She was found by a passerby, tied up and left in a ditch on the side of the road. She claimed that 3 Hispanic men had abducted her at gunpoint, assaulted her, and stole her vehicle. But the truth was that she had stashed her SUV in a garage and then had an accomplice tie her up and drive her out to where she would later be found. All of this to get a payout from her insurance company for her stolen vehicle. Dee was subsequently charged with insurance fraud and falsely reporting a crime. Eventually, Dee has had enough. You're the one that's twisting my past and making it bigger than it is. It's so amazing that in 37 years, that's all that has happened to me, and now you're treating me like I'm a psycho that kills for money. You people are just sick in the head, and I don't have time to listen to this anymore. I really want my life back. Susan 1 responds, I wonder if Abraham wants his life back too. And then, Dee's final message. I can't post here anymore. I just found out why one of you are so negative toward me. You are related to one of the people Abraham loaned very large amounts of money to. You want me discredited so you don't have to pay anything. With that, she disappears. Nevertheless, the efforts of these amateur investigators weren't going unnoticed, as law enforcement was keeping an eye on their progress with great interest. Polk County Detective David Clark came across the Websleuths forum and was amazed by the information that the sleuths were uncovering. In fact, he was doubly amazed to find that these ordinary people with no resources but their wits and access to the internet were somehow getting their hands on important files, such as property records, financial records, and purchase agreements, documents that he'd originally need a subpoena to obtain on his own. He makes an account investigating the case and says, I've spent the last hour reading all these posts and I will say that I am impressed. Understand that there is a lot more to this case than meets the eye. Keep looking, because there are some things being missed. Once all is said and done, the truth will be known. He also promises that they'd get whoever was responsible for Shakespeare's disappearance. He doesn't divulge information about the case. It's a police matter after all, but he does encourage them to continue investigating certain leads. He nudges them toward the lawyers involved in this case, advice that the sleuths heed. Sleuthster looks at 3 such lawyers: Arnold Levine, Michael LaRudo, and Willie Gary. These were the lawyers during Shakespeare's trial against Ford. Levine was one of the lawyers who represented Ford. He often took on wealthy clientele, so his involvement in all this was peculiar. LaRudo, the other lawyer who represented Ford, came from a prominent Cuban community within Tampa. Lastly, there was Gary, the attorney who represented Shakespeare. However, further digging reveals nothing of note, other than the fact that Gary stood to earn $2 million from legal fees during the case. A dead end. However, the sleuths eventually came across the name of another one of Shakespeare's lawyers, Howard Stitzel, who represented him during some of his child support cases. Users LB Minnesota and I Want to Help are instrumental in discovering lots of information on Stitzel, from shady financial statements to property records. LB Minnesota posts, David Howard Stitzel was the attorney on record on many of this questionable mortgage transactions passing through LLCs formed in Abraham's name. How much involvement he had in setting up investments, trusts, etc. is still unknown. Since Stitzel, Moore, and others were essentially taking over Abraham's finances, it's fair to access their own financial situation to ensure they were representing their client/friend and not themselves. Public records show that Stitzel is going through a divorce, and that he also has a history of debt and non-payment of child support. On December 8, 2009, they learned that Stitzel not only represented Shakespeare, but he was also Dee Dee's personal lawyer. Just a few days prior, he claimed to have spoken with Shakespeare earlier in October. Stitzel stated that he was confident that he was still alive, just missing. Meanwhile, the operator of Websleuths.com, Trisha Griffith, receives an email from someone claiming to be Dee Dee. D. Moore contacted me last night and said, I need all comments that D. Moore placed removed. My friend logged into your site using my name and was writing comments. Right after that email, I received this one. You never verified this was me. My friend got upset with your post and decided to add some comments to your site. I want all comments from D. Moore removed. D. Moore has also provided a phone number. This is true. We did not verify this person, but we tried. We contacted her several times, but she did not reply. Trisha was unsure of how to discern who was telling the truth, so Susan 1 suggests, I'm no computer genius, but I do remember that every computer is assigned its own IP address, a unique number assigned to that computer by the server. Trisha does as she suggests and checks the IP address of the email and compares it to the IP address on the forum. They're a match. As soon as this information came to light, another person posts on Dee Dee's account. Only this time, they aren't claiming to be Dee Dee or her friend. They claim to be her son, Robert James Moore. You could be some fat guy behind a desk reading this message or someone who just doesn't have a life, but I ask please stop commenting on my mother and my relatives. Some people you list are not even related to you or the case. Please, it is not healthy to sit for hours at a time looking up what you think is the truth about my mother while you guzzle down your potato chips, putting on pound after pound. Hope you have a good upcoming Christmas and give up trying to be detectives because you really suck at it. For someone who was supposedly just 14 years old, Robert speaks with all the sophistication of a college student trying to hit a word count on an essay. Robert, you write very well for being 14, smiley face. Thank you. I'm a straight A student. He also seems to have intimate knowledge of the case, enough for him to fervently defend his supposed mother. You imbeciles can't find anything to do except for comment on one person's life. Look, if you think for 1 second my mother killed Abraham Shakespeare, you are way off the mark. I watched Abraham pack up and leave. I would too if I had that much drama in my life. Needless to say, no one takes the bait. Feelings of disgust mount as they see that Dee Dee is willing to involve her son and try to cover her tracks. Dee Dee Moore said it was her friend at first. When she figured out her messages could be traced right to her service provider and then to her home computer through her IP address, she had to change her story. Not her friend, no, it was her child. That would fit with the fact that the messages are coming from her home rather than her friend's house. Throwing your own kid under the bus when you are cornered is about as low as you can go. Amidst all this chaos, there is a ray of clarity. On December 15th, LB Minnesota finds a house, 5802 State Road, 60 East Suite No. 2, Plant City. But what's interesting isn't the house itself. It's who bought it. Shar Krasnicki, Dee Dee's partner in their company, American Medical Professionals, purchased the home in April of 2009. But this is only the first piece of the puzzle. What's strange is that Shakespeare and Dee Dee's lawyer, Howard Stitzel, changed the address of his law firm to this very house. But that isn't all. The address on Abraham Shakespeare LLC and the address of American Service Professionals LLC, another business formed by Dee Dee under false name Doris Donegan, are both also at 5802 State Road 60 East. Now, either this is the most multifunctional company in the world, or something fishy is going on. User CrimeStop, who claims to be a Plant City native, adds another detail that could prove important. Krasnicki is not only Dee Dee's business partner, but also her boyfriend. As other posters begin uncovering more and more pieces of information, theories are becoming more detailed. Imaniru recalls the video where Dee Dee appears to prod Shakespeare, who appears tired and stressed, about the possibility of leaving the town or country altogether. Imaniru hypothesizes that perhaps before the video, Dee Dee lied to Shakespeare, telling him that there had been some serious legal errors involving the property deals that he could go to jail for. And so she promised to hide him until she could prove him innocent. And thus, they should make this video to make it look like he wanted to leave the country as a cover for when he would go into hiding. LB Minnesota also theorizes that Dee Dee and her lawyer, Stitzel, approached Shakespeare shortly after his lawsuit against Ford. The pair then convinced Shakespeare that they could protect his assets if they moved them under Dee Dee's company, American Medical Professionals. Dreamweaver adds that it's entirely possible then that she has him under lock and key, perhaps sedated, with medicine administered by some of her supposed nursing staff. By early January 2010, a slew of new information surfaced. Shakespeare's mother, Elizabeth, received a phone call from a man that claimed to be her son. Dee Dee was the one who handed her the phone, but she knew her son, and she knew it wasn't him. She reported the matter to the police, who had already connected the phone call to Dee Dee. Police investigators discovered that Dee Dee had not only been bribing people to phone in false sightings of Shakespeare, but that she was also in possession of Shakespeare's phone. She had been texting herself and Shakespeare's relatives this entire time. January 10th, 2010, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd holds a press conference. During his speech, he reinforces the idea that Dee Dee very likely had something to do with Shakespeare's disappearance, and that even if she didn't, she certainly came into possession of a large chunk of his money. As much as $840,000 that she supposedly paid Shakespeare for his home is still unaccounted for. But Judd says that he and the police department are close to connecting all the dots, and he once again urges the public to approach them with any information that could lead them to Shakespeare. They also up the reward to $10,000. Further digging reveals that Dee Dee previously paid one of Shakespeare's cousins $5,000 to deliver a birthday card, supposedly signed by Shakespeare to his mother. She also offered $200,000 to anyone who would report a sighting of Shakespeare. Then, no more than a week later, things escalate. They suspend Officer Troy Young, a 42-year-old cop who was on the force since 1990. The reason? Selling sensitive information to Dee Dee. This is a felony and a grave breach of public trust. Dee Dee offered him a $200 check and a plane ticket for his daughter in exchange for him figuring out information on a car that she saw parked outside her house. 2 weeks later, January 26, 2010, Howard Stitzel, the lawyer of Dee Dee and Shakespeare, walks up to his office on 5802 State Road East and is surprised to find police investigators swarming the area. Bright yellow crime scene tape encircles the perimeter of the house, along with the house next door. Officers are armed with shovels and metal detectors to survey the area. What are they looking for? The police don't say, but one thing's for sure, they were going to dig. Stitzel's own lawyer, Glenn Lansky, is adamant that he and his client have nothing to hide. Dee Dee's new lawyer, Rusty Franklin, on the other hand, remains silent. But the Polk County Sheriff's Department aren't the only ones on the scene. It's a joint operation with neighboring Hillsborough County, but no one is arrested. Not yet, at least. The next day, January 27, 2010, Websleuths user Elaine Bennis shares updates about what's going down at the property they had been investigating, and the forum is buzzing with a mix of emotions. Susie Q posts, "I can't stand predatory people like Dee Dee Moore. How many lives did her and her buddies destroy? To say I'm anxiously awaiting the perp walk is an understatement." Joybell writes, "Where is Dee Moore now? Are you scared, Dee Moore? You should be." Sleuthster recalls the classic story of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, as she posts, "Thump, thump, thump, thump." Back at the house, police bring in excavation equipment to peel away a layer of concrete on the property. The slab itself is about 100 yards behind the building and is roughly 5 feet deep and 30 feet across. However, because of the sensitive nature of what may lay underneath, much of the digging is done by hand. But how did the police know to dig here in the first place? They say that they received a tip, though they didn't say from whom. Whoever they were, the police must deem them trustworthy enough to conduct a dig in the first place. The previous property owner, Robert Land, reports that the concrete slab was actually placed sometime in March or April, around the same time that Shakespeare was last sighted. On Websleuths, they all wait for something. Anything. Sleuthster can't help but find this whole situation foolish. If they have found Abraham buried there, she reaffirms my belief that she is just plain dumb. Bury a body on your property and then pour a cement slab over the body like this would not draw attention. She should have just put a neon sign out saying, "Hey, dig here." Susan 1 gives an update on Dee Dee. The news said that she has secluded herself in Abraham's house. That is not how I would spend my final days of freedom. Then, it finally happens. On January 28th, 2010, police unearthed several bags, as well as a rolled-up oriental rug, underneath the concrete slab. They move a tent over the site and continue to snap photographs of the remains inside. Eventually, Shady Oaks Girl posts the update they had all been waiting for. Channel 10 just reported that an official announcement is coming momentarily, but the reporter indicates a body has been found. The medical examiner will have to determine who the remains belong to, but the sleuths know it could only be one person. Sleuthster stated, "Even though I was expecting this, it is still difficult to imagine. I was really holding out hope he was on the beach somewhere drinking a margarita." Before the day ends, Trisha logs online and addresses the Websleuths forum. "Guys, I just got off with the detective in the case. I'm going to close this thread and start a new one with the word deceased. This is heartbreaking." The very next day, Friday, January 29th, fingerprints taken from the body confirm that it is indeed Abraham Shakespeare, to no one's surprise. He was also wearing the same clothing he wore in the video Dee Dee filmed, which meant it may have been his last moments. They also found bloodstains that matched Shakespeare's DNA on the carpet in her home office. There was no longer any doubt in anyone's mind that Dee Dee is responsible in some way, shape, or form. It's only a matter of time before she is arrested. In fact, shortly after Shakespeare's body was discovered, Dee Dee's lawyer, Rusty Franklin, drops her, citing ethical obligations. Then, on Tuesday, February 2nd, Dee Dee addresses members of the media outside Shakespeare's house. She reaffirms that she did not kill Shakespeare, stating she would not pull a gun on another human being. Shortly after, she is arrested. Later, during a press conference by local authorities, they announced that they are charging Dee Dee with accessory to first-degree murder after the fact, meaning Dee Dee assisted whoever the killer was after Shakespeare had already been killed. They're cautious. They want to ensure that Dee Dee is hit with something rather than an overeager charge and risk her walking away. If they were to immediately charge her with first-degree murder, that she herself shot Shakespeare, and it turned out she didn't, she could walk. But sleuths like Susie Q couldn't help but wonder, do you have any idea who the tip came from that led to this discovery? Police eventually reveal several new pieces of information that they weren't able to share before, which paint a better picture and fill in the gaps. Around April 6, 2009, Dee Dee hired a man to dig a hole in the backyard of 5802 State Road 60 East, claiming that it was for construction debris. This is the same hole where Shakespeare was buried and ultimately discovered. Incidentally, Boy's mom had already hypothesized that Dee Dee must have enlisted another man's help. I'm doubting that DM went out there and hand-dug the area. Does that mean she hired someone to dig the hole that she would have needed to put a body in, and then had someone pour a concrete slab over top? Dee Dee also buried bags of limestone with Shakespeare to slow down the rate of decomposition, which also inhibits any stench. After subpoenaing Dee Dee and Shakespeare's phone records, they found all of the calls from Shakespeare were made from the same location as Dee Dee's phone, so the investigators knew that Dee Dee, through fake phone calls, texts, and gifts, kept up the charade that Shakespeare was alive and well, that he just didn't want to be found. Later in March, a search affidavit for Dee Dee's properties and computers detailed her suspicious behavior that would eventually lead to her arrest. This included numerous mortgages taken in Shakespeare's name, money from Shakespeare being funneled into personal and business accounts belonging to herself and her associates, and the lavish purchases she made for herself with Shakespeare's money. However, this affidavit also brings to light a very important person to this case. Remember all those calls that Dee Dee faked to make it seem like Shakespeare was alive? She needed a male voice, so she enlisted the help of one Greg Smith. That's right, Shakespeare's barber and one of his closest friends. Lakeland police observed Smith meeting with Dee Dee on December 28, 2009. When they approached him, he agreed to act as their inside informant. Over the next following weeks, Smith wore a wire and continued to meet with Dee Dee, supplying police with valuable intel. Smith continued to send false texts and messages under the pretext of helping Dee Dee, but was secretly informing police of her activities. Dee Dee then asked Greg Smith if he knew anyone who would willingly take the fall for Shakespeare's murder. That's when he introduced her to Mike Smith, an undercover police officer from Lake Wales Police Department. Mike agreed to do it for $50,000, claiming to be facing a 25-year sentence anyway. However, on the condition that Dee Dee tell him where the body was to make his confession believable. Dee Dee didn't just tell him where it was, she handed him the very gun used to kill him. The plan was that he would move the body to a new burial site and then direct the officers to it. But, of course, he instead brought the police to where it was currently buried, at her house. These details would resurface and come back to haunt Dee Dee on November 28, 2012, 2 years after she was arrested at her trial in Tampa, Florida. She was being tried not just for accessory to first-degree murder after the fact. No, she was on trial for full-on first-degree murder. Full stop. Dee Dee was adamant that she was innocent, that it was a drug dealer by the name of Roland who shot Shakespeare in her home with her gun when they came to discuss a loan. Her new lawyer, Byron Hillman, conceded that while his client knew of what happened to Shakespeare, no one could say for sure that she actually pulled the trigger. The informant, Greg Smith, testified to the court about his interactions with Dee Dee, of how he was paid to pretend Shakespeare was still alive, deliver false messages to Shakespeare's mother, and to find someone willing to take the blame for Shakespeare's murder. On December 10, 2012, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Dee Dee guilty of the first-degree murder of Abraham Shakespeare. She was sentenced to mandatory life imprisonment, plus an additional 25 years because she had used a gun. During closing statements, Judge Emmett Battles called her the most manipulative person he had ever seen. Dee Dee was led away in chains as tears streamed down her face. And until the very end, she proclaimed her innocence. Whether these were tears from remorse for what she had done, sadness that she was caught, or crocodile tears entirely, is up for you to decide. Dee Dee is held at the Lowell Correction Institution, a women's prison in Ocala, Florida. Ironically enough, in 2023, while in jail, she advocated for the signing of a bill that would keep the names of lottery winners secret for 90 days. "It puts a target on them," she said. To this day, Dee Dee maintains she didn't kill Shakespeare. As for her accomplices, well, her boyfriend Krasnicki returned the Corvette that Dee Dee had bought to the police in an attempt to cooperate. He also agreed to return any other property obtained illegally. In the end, both he and Stitzel never faced any charges. Somehow, despite having previously lied about talking to Shakespeare, Stitzel stated, "I feel like I've been victimized in this whole thing. I know nothing about all this other craziness." The Websleuths had proved themselves an invaluable asset in the arrest of Dee Dee Moore by obtaining property records, financial statements, and other important documents, which would otherwise have taken police months to access if at all. Dee Dee certainly didn't do herself any favors either though, as she had basically exposed herself on the forum. Shortly after they had arrested Dee Dee, Detective Clark left the sleuths with the last few words of praise. His post read, "I want to give you all a personal thank you. You are all very dedicated and good at what you do. Take care and keep up the good work." Years later, during an interview, Clark would look fondly on the investigation, and he went on to say that, "I don't know if any other detectives would acknowledge the huge impact that the Websleuths investigation had on our case, but I will acknowledge it. The Websleuths were very instrumental in helping us in the case. While this case was a triumph for amateur sleuths and law enforcement working in harmony to solve this case, this was still, most of all, a horrible tragedy for Abraham Shakespeare and the loved ones he left behind." So, we leave you now with some words from one of the Websleuths, Imaniru, who claims to have been involved in some outreach in Abraham Shakespeare's area and to have actually met him on one occasion. But first, thank you for watching the video. If you appreciate the weeks of work that these people put into making this video, then please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, and perhaps watching the video that we will put on your screen at the end of the video. Word on the street here is that Abraham is a simple man, rather carefree and happy, not afraid to work for just enough to get by. Quite a few people know the side of Abraham that would always give his last few dollars to anyone, sometimes screwed up and made mistakes like anyone. A kind and generous man who thought along the lines of the pay it forward concept, not worried if it came back to him. Did the best he could with what he had. I was blessed to have one single meet with Abraham pre-lotto. At the time, I didn't think much of the encounter being so brief, but I do remember his handshake. It was strong, yet gentle, true to heart, and his eyes spoke volumes of sincerity and love.